Hello, hello. It's Justin Colletti of SonicScoop. Thanks for joining me for this week's episode of the SonicScoop podcast. And today we're going to be talking about a mixing engineer by the name of Michael Brauer. Michael Brauer is probably one of the most acclaimed and one of the most influential mixing engineers of all time. I love Michael Brauer. I love hearing this guy talk. I have interviewed him probably more times than any other mixing engineer. I think I've interviewed him 5 times at least over the years, maybe 6. I think I've lost count at this point. But man, Michael is one of those guys that people love to hear talk. They love to read interviews with him. His approach to bus compression and bus processing has made people's heads spin and kind of changed people's approaches to it. But is the guy all just talk, or can he mix? And that is what we are going to find out today. As usual for this whole Mix Masters series, this series where we go into the mixes of great mixers, I've got, as per usual, my screen pulled up here. Let me share it with you. There's my Safari screen because we're going to be looking at some stuff that's only available in YouTube, but I'm also going to be playing you a bunch of stuff out of Spotify. And I've made this entire Spotify playlist for you guys, a comparison playlist. There's 120 songs on it. Obviously, we're not going to get through all of them in the live stream, but if you really want to hear what Michael Brauer's mixes sound like, this is a great way to figure that out. You can get a sense for exactly what his mixes sound like compared to the mixes of others. I have a whole bunch of examples here where you get to hear Michael's mix against a different mixer's mix on the same exact album with the same mastering engineer, with the same artist, same producer. And we'll hear his tracks next to someone else where it's going to sound, it's so close where this is almost like a scientific experiment, right? When you have the same producer, same mastering engineer, same studio, same artist, all of that stuff. Obviously, the songs are going to be different, but as much as possible, I'm going to play back-to-back songs that have similar tempos, similar keys, similar instrumentation, so you can get a sense for what Michael values in the mix compared to others and what his sound and approach is like. This is a big thing because there's so many people out there giving mixing advice and some great mixers giving mixing advice, but you got to know who to take advice from. And to do that, you got to figure out who mixes to your tastes, who makes things sound the way you'd like to hear things sound. And that's a big thing that we can help uncover for you in this series. Hopefully you'll come away from this or other episodes on great mixers like Chris Lord-Alge, Chad Blake, Serban Ganea. I hope to do Manny Marroquin at one of these points. And you'll get a sense for what each of them does well and whose advice you want to take on what aspect of mixing. All right, with all of that out of the way, I think we can get straight into listening to some mixes. The only thing I got to do before we get into it is give the briefest of shout outs to our sponsors. The most important sponsor, as always, is you. How do you sponsor this podcast? Sponsor yourself. Check out one of our great full-length courses like Mixing Breakthroughs, Mastering Demystified, Compression Breakthroughs, EQ Breakthroughs. They will change the way that you mix, guaranteed, forever, for the better, or your money back. So check those out. If you can't go for a full course right now, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, all that good stuff. If you're listening to one of the audio-only versions, give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really does help spread the word. Also, big shout out and thanks to Soundtoys, making some of my favorite creative mixing effects in the known universe. Try out anything they make for free for 30 days over at soundtoys.com. Also, in addition to Soundtoys, another brand sponsoring this week is Baby Audio. If you go to babyaud.io/SonicScoop, you will get 15% off of anything they make with the code SonicScoop at checkout. I believe those guys have some sales going on right now, so check them out before they end over at babyaud.io/SonicScoop. They make really great creative effects as well. These are effects that are all about either solving problems or adding character to your mix. They've got heavy compression. They've got radical vocal processing, a whole bunch of stuff. 15% off with the code SonicScoop at checkout. And our last little shout out before we get right into listening to some records together is to, let me grab him here, Focusrite. We're actually giving away 3 Focusrite Scarlett interfaces right now. If you go over to sonicscoop.com/contest, that's sonicscoop.com/contest, you can enter to win. You got 3 chances to win a new Focusrite Scarlett interface. All right, with all of that truly out of the way now, let's get into hearing some tracks together. As I said, this whole playlist, you can find it in the show notes down below. When possible, I'll bring up the frequency analyzer and the spectrogram so we can look at what's going on here, as well as listening to what's going on. But just a quick overview of some of the artists that we're going to be listening to. Probably Michael's best known for his work with Coldplay. He did that song Yellow, which is a huge song. And it starts off with out of phase drums. And this is one of the interesting things about Michael. Like his assistant, the story goes, set something up in the Pro Tools session where there was like a duplicate of the drums and the delay compensation wasn't off on the plugins. So the drums were out of phase. They had this weird hollow, comb filtery kind of sound. And Michael's like, what's that? That's cool. Okay, let's use that. And it made it to the mix. So you have one of the biggest tracks, one of the biggest pop tracks of the 2010s that basically has a mistake. Maybe you could argue an intentional mistake in it. Let's check out this record. How many times has this been streamed on Spotify alone? Almost 2.5 billion times with a mistake in there. So that's one of the things that'll give you a sense for Michael's approach. Michael's approach is not about making things sound hi-fi and impressive. He is not trying to get the tallest, deepest, widest, most detailed sounding mixes out there. No, that is not Michael's vibe. Michael's vibe is vibe. What Michael tries to do on all of his mixes, in my experience, is he tries to really amplify two things: groove and the narrative of the vocal. And there are certain things that he's looking for in groove. One of the things you don't find with Michael is a lot of really articulate, detailed ear candy, like things that pop out of the far sides, like these ear candy elements that take over the entire mix. That's not his thing. He tries to get a feel, tries to get the emotion of the track across and enhance the emotion of the track as it goes along. And he puts a lot of movement into his mixes. He really does a lot of riding on things like vocal and section-to-section rides to make sure that we're kind of pulled along by the arc of the song. And I think that's what he does really well. The things you could complain about Michael is that compared to some other mixers, his mixes could sound a little bit more mid-rangey sometimes, or they could lack some of the separation and detail and some of these things that mixing audio engineers nerd out about. But his audience isn't audio engineers. It's people who want to listen to records, and particularly the kinds of records that he mixes. So that's the kind of thing that we're going to hear in here. We'll hear a lot of examples of this, not only on Coldplay, but I'll give you a really good example here, another modern artist, George Ezra, where I think that you can hear just how radically different the track is. They chose Michael to mix from the rest of the album, and how radically different it sounds from the rest of the record. I've got some Coldplay tracks you can listen back and forth between, John Mayer tracks, Ellie King. There's some interesting stuff in here where you can hear some of his mixes against Tom Elmhurst. In a lot of this John Mayer stuff, we can hear his mixes against another great mixer, Manny Marroquin. And then we get down to some of the artists that I'm really into out of these. Grizzly Bear, I really like a lot, particularly the record that he mixed, Shields. And this is not a hi-fi impressive sounding record, but is a super vibey sounding record. He also did a remix of an entire Bob Dylan album that Bob Dylan didn't like the original mixes of, which I think were done by Daniel Lanois. And Michael does a much drier take on the Bob Dylan mixes. So there's 120 different tracks here from a whole bunch of different artists. We've got The Fray, Bon Jovi, James Brown, Luther Vandross, Melissa Etheridge. There's so much different stuff in here, but we're just going to do samples of a few tracks I think are really going to kind of cement some of these differences in your ear for you. So without any further yakking from me, let's get into the first track. This is Michael Brauer's iconic mix of Coldplay's Yellow off of Parachutes. And then we'll play another song off this record that wasn't mixed by him. So here's Michael's mix first. Now, if you hadn't noticed it before, have you noticed the comb filtery sound that's here on the drums? You can especially hear it right in this introduction. And like that kind of hollow feel comes from the comb filtering on the drums that we're talking about. Now, as we get further on the song, what are some of the most prominent elements in this mix. Well, here in this opening section, it's really guitars and snare. Like everything leads towards the snare. The beat is so stable. And this is one of the things that Michael Brauer does really well in his mixes, my opinion, is he makes the beat feel really stable. Whatever he's accenting, often he has a big accent on kick drum. Not as much in this track. It's more of a snare accented song. But whatever relationship he goes for with how the drum kit's supposed to stick in the mix, it like stays there the whole entire time. Let's hear what happens when the vocals come in. I'll get us right about to where we had left off.
Look at the stars, look how they shine for you, and everything you do. Yeah, they were all yellow. I came along, I wrote a song for you, and all the things you do, and it was called Yellow.
There's a tiny bit of like, almost feels like a little bit of tonal development that snares that goes across. But what I hear here is a vocal that is like front and center. Everything about this song is serving the main point of this song, which is the vocal, followed by the snare drum, followed by what's going on with the guitars. And there is enough clarity and detail in things that you can hear each element. You can notice that there's an electric guitar and an acoustic guitar, and they're playing different parts, and you can notice the hi-hats if you're listening for them, and there's, enough separation to get that, but they all feel extremely glued together, like they're all living in the same world. And there's this really stable compression that's happening across the drum kit, where the snare just is there at the same level the whole time. But what you don't have is this crazy wide separation where you don't have an electric guitar panned hard right and an acoustic guitar panned hard left, and the electric guitar is mid-rangey and the acoustic guitar is bright and trebly, and they're being pulled apart into their own dimensions. We're doing all this mixery stuff. No, he glues stuff together. And that's one of the big differences that we'll start to hear when we compare his mix directly to other mixers' work, is just how cohesive, like the whole track is. It feels like it's one unit moving and breathing together. And part of this is accomplished through Michael Brauer's approach. What he's famous for, particularly in his analog days, which only ended very recently, is mixing through multiple buses. He would mix on SSL console, where he'd have 4 different buses, each of which would have its own compressor on it. And then each of those 4 main group compressors would go to some compression for the entire thing. And he would put instruments together. I mean, I've done entire videos. I have an entire video. We have a Michael Brauer playlist where you can see all the times he's been on the channel. But I have a video where I explain his Brauerized technique. He has his own videos on it and his own articles from Tape Op. He did a famous one back in the day. But basically, his approach is more or less certain instruments might go to certain buses together. It could be that bass and drums are going to one bus together, and it could be, depending on what role they're playing in the song, that the acoustic guitars and the piano go to another bus together, and those things are being compressed together and moving together. And then all of those 4 subgroups that are being compressed then go into his main master bus. Now, this is technical, nerdy stuff, and we can go into way more detail on that, but it's just like Michael Brauer was that guy early on who said to himself, how can I get things more glued together in the mix? And like put all of his stats and his like ability powers, like amplifying the ability powers of, get things to glue in the mix. If you're creating your own Dungeons and Dragons mixer character, that's like where all of his stats would go. Some guy creates his warrior character and you give 20 to strength, and someone creates a wizard and they give 20 to intelligence. For Michael Brauer, he's rolling 20s for make the mix glue together. Let's listen to a tiny bit more of this, and then let's get into a track not mixed by him off the same album. And let me know, is a Dungeons and Dragons reference relevant in 2024? Am I just dating myself and showing that I'm 42? Let me know. What should I be saying? Would it be your Fallout character? Even that's old now. My goodness, what are the RPGs these days? Let me know. Is World of Warcraft still a thing? I don't know. Anyway, a little bit more of this track, on to the next one.
So then I took my turn. Oh, what a thing to have done. And it was all yellow.
All All right, we'll cut it there. And now let's go over to the next track off this album that he didn't mix. And listen for the difference that you hear. Tell me what you hear differently, and I'll tell you what I hear. Here we go. This is High Speed, done by another mixer on the same album. Right off the bat, Michael Brauer would never mix acoustic guitars like that. And I say this having literally just listened to 120 of his songs today. I have not heard a single track where Michael Brauer has mixed acoustic guitars like this, where they sound light and spacey and stereo, and there's like lots of transient on them, and they're hovering above the rest of the track, and they're really forward and dry and wide. Michael Brauer would not do that with these acoustic guitars. He would most likely shave off some of those transients, tuck them back further in the mix, center them a little bit more, make them a little bit darker, and make them a little bit more distant. And we hear this big difference with this other mixer. He has, I think it's like an electric guitar pad in the background. It's like way back and way dark and way far away from you. And then up close to you are these acoustic guitars, which are really dry, really bright, really wide. There's that dichotomy, separation, giving things their own separate world to live in, to enhance our depth and width. Michael Brauer's not looking to do that. Listen to this intro again, see if you can pick up the things that I mean that Michael wouldn't do in most of his mixes. Here we go. So bright, so tight, so high, so wide, those acoustic guitars. And such a difference in depth between the electric and the acoustic, right? So there's this way roomier, slightly trashier sound on the drums, or trashy in a different way than Michael's is. And there's this long reverb on the snare that just hangs, and there's space for it to hang. Again, not like what Michael's doing, where his sound is a little bit more blocky and cohesive and kind of all together. So listen a little further.
Can anybody fly this thing? For my head explode, for my head stops.
Big stereo reverb on the vocal that's almost as loud as the vocal. I'm exaggerating slightly. And then the bass is a little bit uncontrolled relative to what Michael would do. And the bass is accented more than the kick. And this is, again, different than the way Michael usually hears things. In the majority of his mixes, it's not a rule, but in the majority of his mixes, he tends to be a little more kick-oriented than bass-oriented. And this one's a little bit the other way around.
We've been living life inside a bubble.
A little bit of sibilance in that reverb too. Not a very Michael-y thing. Good mix as well. Totally different aesthetic. Compare that one more time to this.
Look at the stars, look how they shine for you.
Do you hear how much more kind of centered and cohesive and gelled together Michael's mix is? And in a quick sip test, an audio engineering type might be like, well, the other mix is better because it has this greater range of high frequency and the width compared to the other one. It's just taller, deeper, and wider. But the Michael mix is like, I don't care about any of that. Are people tuning into the song or not? And if we listen to look at the relative number of plays on them, now, of course, this has more to do with the song than the mix, granted. But, there's 93 million plays on this other guy's thing, which is great. But we're looking at, 2.5 billion on Michael. So clearly, what end listeners care about in a mix isn't always the same thing that mixery guys and audio-y guys and producer-y guys care about in a mix. And even if it's just the song and not the mix that made the one that Michael mixed a hit that has, more than 10x the listens here, I think it's like 20x, 25x. The listens, at least Michael's mix, at the very least, isn't getting in the way of it doing 2.5 billion streams. So the way that he's mixing is not wrong and is not going to hurt your track. And if anything, maybe it helps it by helping the listener focus on what's really important in the song and keeping front and center the things that are going to be emotionally compelling to the listener. And that is, I think, Michael's big thing, is it's not about sonically impressing us. It's about emotional connection. Now, I want to give a couple more examples that really show you some of the differences here. This next one is George Ezra. This is from an album called Staying at Tamra's. Not too familiar with it, not too familiar with him, but it's an album where all the other stuff on this album was mixed by someone else, except for one track, which was mixed by Michael Brauer. And we'll hear some of the differences there. This one is a little bit more recent as well. It's from 2018. So, man, 2018, I say that's recent, but that's like 6 years ago now. Is that even recent in music age? Let me know. All right. I'm going to play this time first the track that isn't Michael Brauer's. The track that is probably the biggest hit off this record, a track called Shotgun. And I'll play a little bit of the intro, maybe I'll kind of jump into the chorus, and then we'll hear Michael's mix and just how different Michael's aesthetic is. And also the song selection, that the one track they chose to give to Michael has a totally different feel than the rest of the tracks on the album, which are closer to this one. So here's the one not mixed by Michael, George Ezra, Shotgun.
Homegrown alligator, see you later, gotta hit the road.
So just first off, we're in a totally different era of mixing. You can hear that, right? This is 2018. What was the Coldplay album was 2000. And already, totally different era, totally different sound. Those 18 years, a lot changed in the way people mix. This one is way louder. You can hear that just from the vocal. And there's even more compression. There's even more kind of brightness, even more of this kind of scooped mid-range thing going on. Let's go a little further.
Gotta hit the road. The sun ain't changed in the atmosphere. Architecture unfamiliar. I could get used to this. Time flies by in the yellow and green. Stick around and you'll see what I mean. There's a mountain top that I'm dreaming of. If you need me, you know where I'll be. I'll be riding shotgun underneath the hot sun, feeling like a someone. I'll be riding shotgun underneath the hot sun, feeling like a someone.
See, this is a totally different era of pop production, right? This is, I mean, so much dry. Like, this has a little bit in common with the Billie Eilish kind of aesthetic that'll come later, even though this is way more pop. There's so much more, like, bigness. There's so much more elements that are electronic. And it's just so much more like a solid brick if you're going to look at this thing in a DAW. But let's check out the song that they picked to have Michael mix. And it's a very different vibe and a much more organic song that comes from a slightly earlier era of pop track. Here we go. This is Hold My Girl from George Ezra. Totally different feel already, right?
I've been waiting for you to come around and tell me the truth about everything that you're going through. My girl, you've got nothing to lose.
So he has a big vocal here. It's not quite as big and dry and upfront and maybe LA sounding as the Shotgun track. He has a little bit more space around it, but it's not nearly as much of this like big reverb thing that you hear after the vocal, like in the other mixer from Coldplay. So he has this kind of roominess around the vocal and this sort of roominess around the acoustic guitar, and they are together in the same world, even though the vocal's allowed to dominate. Let's keep going.
Cold nights and the Sunday mornings on your way out of the grave. I've got time, I've got love, got confidence, you rise above. Give me a minute to hold my girl. Give me a minute to hold my girl. Crowded town, silent bed, pick a place to rest your head.
But you hear how like the whole instrumental part of the track is really glued together and cohesive, and they're all kind of in the same world, in the same space, and they're kind of moving together. He does let the vocal sit on top a little bit more and be a little bit brighter than the rest of the track. But, and it's still tied to the rest of the track. But there's just something about like all of the instrumental tracks being glued together into the same space, kind of moving together and creating one world together. Whereas in the more modern production on Shotgun, it's like, oh, here's one percussion element over here, and here's a different percussion element over here. And a lot of things are really dry and forward, and each of them are kind of in their own space, where Michael's seeking to bring them together and to find some kind of unity between them. So I think that's a big thing in his approach. Let's listen to a few more seconds of it, and then we'll go on to another track.
Give me a minute to hold my girl. Give me a minute to hold my girl. I've been dreaming about us, working hard and saving it up.
Yeah, just the way he keeps the vocal like in the same focus throughout the entire track. No matter how many elements are in there, the vocal always feels like it's occupying the same kind of relative space in the track. And this is something he does really well. He's great at volume rides and doing little moves within things in the track to just help it flow from beginning to end better, if that makes sense. And although I'm not traditionally the biggest Coldplay fan myself, I have to admit, when I was sitting down and listening to Yellow, start to finish, I'm like, wow, there's a incredibly realized arc to this song. And the mix helps that be realized. And it just kind of pulls you along. And just when it feels like it's going to get stagnant, it doesn't stagnate. So that's something that really is important for pop production. All right, let's go on now to another artist here called Pete Murray. And this is another slightly older one. This is from 2003, but I think it's going to exemplify some of the differences between Michael's approach and others. Oh, and before I do, I wish I had mentioned this up front, but I kind of do these like off the cuff, just off of notes that I've made to myself. But one of the things I want to mention is that I actually have a mix where we compare me to Michael Brauer. I have mixed the same song that Michael Brauer did, and I actually did a video about it. It's not as popular as it should be because I'm not as good at YouTube as some people are. I probably didn't title it as well as I could have. I probably didn't thumbnail it as well as I could have. But, maybe 20,000 people have seen it or something. And we have a lot of comments. And there's a lot of people who prefer my mix over Michael's. And there's a lot of people who prefer Michael's mix over mine. I also did my mix using nothing but stock plugins. If we have a moment, maybe we can listen to that a little later on. I can bring up that track. But here is another one where he goes head to head with another mixer. The guy who mixed this track, Bail Me Out, mixed most of the other tracks in the album. The guy who mixed this fourth track is Eric Sarafin. And if you don't know that name, you might know him better by his name, Mixer Man. He wrote a book that was famous on the audio internet forums back in the day called The Mixer Man Diaries, where he basically just rants about being really annoyed by a really annoying band for like, I don't know how many 100 pages the book is, but he's just like really annoyed at this band the whole time is basically the book. But he's famous from that. And he was a big guy in the internet forums back in the day. And we get to hear one of his mixes compared to Michael Brauer as well. So this artist, I'm not familiar with, Pete Murray, but apparently a bunch of people are familiar with him. I think he's from Australia. And some of these tracks, the most popular one on it has, 23 million listens on it. So, not totally obscure artist, but a slightly smaller artist. And I think the differences in the mixes here are substantial. First, I'll play Michael Brauer's. And what stands out to me here, again, is just how solid and consistent he's able to make the kick drum and how glued together things are and how much of a focus he puts on the vocal and how in focus he keeps that vocal throughout the entire track. Let's listen to a little bit of Feeler, Michael Brauer mix by Pete Murray.
Inside my head today I felt you. Send my imagination stray, I hold you. Responsible for all my ways, I told you. You take me into happy days, I know that you and I will be always on side.
I can hear the compression digging in a little bit sometimes on the sides, and he's not afraid of that. You can really, if you know compression, you can sometimes hear the compressors working on Michael's mixes, but they just like breathe and pulse and move with the track a little bit in a way that isn't annoying or over compressed sounding. In fact, what we've noticed, I think, on a bunch of these tracks so far is none of the Michael Brauer mixes so far have been like crazy loud. There's been plenty of compression on them, but not a ton of really hard limiting to bring up the lufts level to like something ridiculous. So this is really, I can tell this artist, he's not the same caliber as Coldplay and George Ezra. Like the arrangements and the performances aren't quite there to the same level, but this is good, competent stuff. Most people, if their record sounded this good and was performed this well, they'd be pretty darn happy with it. And let's listen to that compared to the take by the other mixer on this album. And just listen to some of those differences. Listen to the difference, particularly in like the weight of the kick drum and in how glued together versus pulled apart things are. So here's a track not mixed by Michael, by Pete Murray. Big guitars. So you hear what I mean? Again, Michael Brauer never mixes acoustic guitars this way. These hard pan, dry, upfront stereo acoustic guitars, in these 120 songs, I haven't heard that yet on a Michael mix. And in case you're wondering how to get around this playlist, all the odd numbered tracks are Michael Brauer, all the even numbered tracks are someone else. But I have not heard that happen yet in a Michael Brauer mix. The other thing here is listen to how absent the kick drum is compared to Michael's mix. Michael will usually find either kick or snare to emphasize more. In this particular track up here, he's emphasizing his kick drum a little bit more, where this guy is emphasizing his hi-hat. Like his hi-hat is almost the biggest thing in his kit, followed by his snare drum, which doesn't have any of the personality and girth and kind of hang that Michael's does. And the kick is almost like non-existent compared to where Michael put his. Let's listen a little further and listen for that difference, how accented the hi-hat is. The snare's behind it and the kick drum's way behind that, and the acoustic guitars are just dry and out to the sides. Totally different style.
2 weeks away from reality, and I was beginning to feel.
Of course, as soon as I play it again, that's when the hi-hat stops playing.
Couldn't be myself.
Let's go back to the intro here. How big those cymbals are. And just a little further ahead, maybe into the chorus. It's wide, but where's the kick? Where's the snare? And why is the vocal now buried under the rest of the band? Michael, what he's really good at is keeping that vocal at the same perceived loudness the whole way.
Oh, can you bail me out of this run? I've got myself in one.
No kick, no snare, and the tambourine is louder than the vocal, basically, in this chorus. And it's not terrible. I mean, it's a totally competent mix. But again, those are things that I wouldn't hear in Michael's. Let's listen to Michael's again. Maybe I'll fast forward into his chorus. First, let's just hear how he handles the kick, right? Really solid. And then let's go further ahead. That's the hardest pan thing we've heard Michael do so far in any of these mixes. That's electric guitar, but it's still like gelled into the mix and has a little bit of the same room on it that's in the rest of the mix.
Got inside my head today, I felt you. Send my imagine.
Do you hear how much louder this vocal is compared to the other stuff around it? There's a shaker in there. There's an electric guitar in there. There's some other odd percussion in there. There's some like bongos. But Michael doesn't really care if you hear the shaker or the bongos. If you listen for them, they're there. But he doesn't care about whether or not you're hearing them. He cares that the vocal's on top of them and that if you want to listen for them, they're there and that they're contributing to the groove. Keep on listening.
Responsible for all my ways, I told you. You take me into happy days. I know that you.
I mean, that vocal is just so much easier to follow. Michael makes him sound like a better singer. It's the same guy singing on both tracks, but on the other track we were listening to, he's getting lost under the whole band. The tambourine's louder than him. The drum kit and the guitars are swallowing him up. And honestly, the vocal isn't compressed enough for modern styles. And he's just kind of like lost in there floating around. And you don't know if he's a good singer or not. But in this track, it feels like, oh, no, guy's got pipes. All right. The guy's like singing. Okay, cool. And what he's got for you is vocal front and center. Never forget the vocal narrative. Never let the vocal drop below the tier it's supposed to be in. And then the whole track should have groove and everything should be gelled together and feel like it's in the same world.
And I will be always on side.
And you hear how in this section, even more elements came to the mix. The whole track got louder still, but the vocal still stays on top. It never drops down out of A tier into some lower tier. Listen to that transition one more time.
Send my imagination stray, I hold you responsible for all my ways. I told you you take me into happy days. I know that you and I will be always.
So you hear how the whole track got bigger, it got wider, it got thicker, it got louder, but the vocal didn't get buried under the whole band like in the other track, Bail Me Out. Now here is Mixer Man's track off of the same album. I think the one song he mixed on it. And I think it's better than the other guys, but it still has a lot of separation. And again, this isn't necessarily bad. There's competent stuff that he's doing, but it doesn't have that same glue that we hear in Michael's. Let's hear a little bit of Eric Sarafin's mix from the same album.
Can you tell me when are you going to realize that you care deep in on your instincts or your alibis? Do you play?
So this guy has a bigger kick drum than the other guy and a bigger snare drum. He has a big hi-hat too. And his vocal's also louder, but his vocal's getting a little bit masked by the drum kit in a way that Michael wouldn't do.
By the rules of this game's being led by so many fools.
Really dry, unprocessed, almost underprocessed vocal sound that, again, Michael would probably have a little bit of room, a little bit of space around it that you wouldn't hear, but you'd like feel the sensation of the vocal being in a space instead of being like right here up against you.
You ignore the system that we're in, 'cause you believe you're too good to commit sin. When you notice it's only in your head.
Really super wide. I mean, that's something that potentially a mixer guy is going to be like, oh, cool, it went from kind of mono to kind of wide. That's cool. And things sound separated from each other, but there's this big hole in the middle that you're never going to find in a Michael mix. He has these really cohesive centers.
When you can justify yourself to your friends, they'll help you when you fall. 'Cause my friend, you're about to hit the floor.
Jethro Tull has entered the chat.
You're falling your way down to the floor. Can you tell me when?
And this guy does treat that flute like an additional lead element, almost like a piece of ear candy, where Michael might like set that in some more like ambience and set it back into the mix and maybe darken the top of it. So one more time, a little bit of the feel of this, and we'll go into the chorus of the other Michael mix.
You lie into her girlfriend's eyes. Does your blood run through your thighs?
Hey, did you know that there's an electric keyboard in this song? Is what that comes in and feels like. Again, Michael wouldn't do that. An electric keyboard makes the entrance. It's not going to steal the show. It's going to amp up the song without drawing attention to itself. And here what Erica is doing is drawing attention to all these new elements. Hey, there's a flute. Did you know there's a flute in the song? Hey, there's electric keyboard. Do you know there's electric keyboard in the song? And that can be a fun way of mixing too. It's not wrong. It's just different than what Michael would do.
Send a chilling pins and needles up your spine. When
And now let's compare that feel to Michael's feel in the chorus.
inside in the
It's amazing how, like, even when there's just an acoustic guitar in there, the whole track feels like it's almost the same level as when there's everything else. And then when the drums come back in, it doesn't feel like it leaped up again. Like, he's really managing these transitions really well. And the whole thing just lives and breathes together as one unit that's making you focus on what the darn singer is singing about. So that's what Michael does. All right. We have done a bunch of examples here. Let me go into a few more. We're about 40 minutes in, so I kind of want to speed up the pace and just hear a few things that maybe I won't go into as much great detail on. But one that I want to check out with you is a song called What If by Coldplay. This is one where a lot of times so far we've been hearing Michael up against... Michael's an A-tier mixer. We've been hearing him against B and C-tier mixers, arguably, in some of these tracks. The guy who I won't name here who did the track for Feeler, the guy who produced this alternate track for Coldplay, they're not at the same level of demand, right, as a guy like Michael Brauer. So maybe it's a kind of unfair comparison. These other guys are sometimes, producing and recording and engineering as well, and they wear a lot of different hats, and they're good at all those hats, where Michael's just a specialized mixer. In this next track, What If we got to hear Michael Brauer compared against another A-list mixer, one of the guys who's in demand for mixing specifically. And that's going to be Tom Lord-Alge, because Tom Lord-Alge did his own version of this song, What If, and there was a single version of What If that was released with the Tom Lord-Alge mix. And I actually cannot bring that up for you on Spotify, unfortunately, but I believe I can get it for you on Safari. So let's go over to Safari Share. Let's change this to sharing Safari. Great. Hopefully we won't get like a YouTube ad right now as soon as I hit play on this. But you can see I have two different versions here. If you look at my tabs up top, here's Coldplay What If Tom Lord-Alge mix, and What If this is the Michael Brauer mix. I'll start them around the same point, about 52 seconds in, and we'll just hear this first kind of meaningful transition in here. Tom Lord-Alge's mix is taller, deeper, wider, brighter, more impressive in ways. But for whatever reason, they decided to use Michael Brauer's mix for the official release. So taller, deeper, wider, brighter, more impressive isn't always the only thing in mixing. So here's Michael Brauer's version of this track.
What if I got it wrong? And no poem or song could put right what I got wrong, or make you feel I belong.
Same section in Tom Lord-Alge.
What if I got it wrong? And no poem or song could put right what I got wrong, or make you feel I belong. What if you should decide that you don't want me there by your side?
And let's hear that section in Michael.
What if you should decide that you don't want me there by your side? That you don't want me there in your life.
So there's something that's brighter and wider and grander about Tom Lord-Alge's mix, but they went with Michael's. What's better about Michael's? Well, for me, it's maybe a little bit more intimate, and it's not trying to impress me as much, where there's this grand quality to what Tom is doing, where the piano has this almost like Elton Johnny vibe about it, right? There's this bright hammer attack thing going on, and there's just this more grand and polished feel about the piano. But is that what this song is about? Like, this is not a grand love song. This is like, what would my life be like if you weren't there. And I feel like that's actually a possibility. And I have to like look at the possibility that you wouldn't be in my life. And like, this is a man who, I don't know, he's not ready to fully connect with what he feels, but is worried about the kinds of feelings that are going to come. Like, it's a kind of like, you know, there's some depth to that, and there's some like vulnerability to that some of the grandness in Tom's maybe doesn't fit as well. Like, I think Michael is connecting to like, what's the emotional point of this song, and how do I help enhance and create that mood? Where I feel like Tom is thinking a little bit more about, how do I make this piano sound better? How do I make sure that I don't lose this bass note? Because there's a bass note in there that is like totally buried in Michael's version that kind of flourishes and comes out in Tom's version. But Michael either doesn't even notice that bass note or doesn't care, or both. Like, it could be both. He doesn't notice because he doesn't care. Like, there's certain things, it almost feels like when I was mixing the same song that Michael did, I was like, man, I can't believe it. It was a similar thing. It was like a bass line. It was like, oh, this beautiful melodic thing happening in the bass line. Didn't you hear that in the arrangement, Michael? Like, don't you want to bring that out? Isn't that so cool? Like, they put in this melodic bass riff here that is so cool. I'm going to make sure that pops because it's fun musically. And Michael, his mix was almost like he didn't even hear that was there. Now, maybe he did hear that it was there and didn't care. Or maybe because he didn't care, he didn't even hear that it was there because he's focusing on something else. What's the singer trying to tell me? And how do I help him tell you that? Totally valid approach, right? They're both valid. And the Tom Lord-Alge mix is obviously not wrong and not bad. I mean, it's a great mix as well. And it doesn't get in the way of the emotion of the song, but the musicians who heard this listened to both and were like, we're going with Michael's. With that in mind, let me just play back a tiny bit of this. Or should I do less of that? You guys can rewind. Why don't you go find these tracks? I've told you the words. If you want to listen to it again, you can do that. I often play these things again because that's like how I would do it with you in person and we're on a live stream. But this is a live stream plus because you'll be able to watch the replay and you can rewind it. So go do that. But hopefully you hear some of those things that I'm talking about. All right, let's get back over to the Spotify screen. Bam, here we are in Spotify. And now we could listen to more Coldplay, but I think we've listened to enough Coldplay. We could listen to a little bit of John Mayer. I want to get to the stuff that I'm more interested in. Out of all these tracks, I really like the Grizzly Bear stuff the most. I was actually surprised by Melissa Etheridge. I'm not like the target demographic for Melissa Etheridge, but like I looked this album up as like her 16th album. And I'm like, all right, homegirl, you made your 16th studio album. Like, you're getting after it. Clearly you like making music. So respect for that. Even though like I'm not a huge Melissa Etheridge fan. I was like, okay, I have to give you a chance knowing that this is your 16th studio album. Like, you don't do that without really loving making music. So anyone who loves making music that much has a soft spot in my heart. So she's won some extra respect from me today. So I gave her a fair listen. But I really want to play some of this Grizzly Bear stuff. The Bob Dylan stuff, big transformation. Maybe we'll hear a little bit of that. And man, I have so much of his early R&B stuff. But I don't think we're going to play a ton of that. But it's there in case you want to go through it. His work with James Brown, you can hear him mixing James Brown compared to Chris Lord-Alge, mixing James Brown from James Brown in the 80s, which is not his best era, in my opinion. But we did that already in the Chris Lord-Alge stream. So let me play you just a little bit more of, just a little bit of Manny Marroquin doing John Mayer versus Michael Brauer doing John Mayer. Manny Marroquin mixed John Mayer's big song of this album, Waiting on the World to Change. And I'm going to play you a song by Michael Brauer that's mixed by Michael Brauer that doesn't have nearly as many listens. However, has a very similar drum rhythm in it. And I think you're going to get a sense for just the difference in priority. Now, I think the big reason that Manny Marroquin's track did better is because the song is better. But there's aspects of Michael Brauer's mix where I'm like, ooh, there's cool things about it that Manny could take from, and there's cool things from Manny that Michael could take from. These are two A-list mixers who each mixed about half the album. So all the odd numbered tracks here are mixed by Michael, and all the even numbered tracks are mixed by Manny. All right, so first, let's do the big hit song that Manny Marroquin mixed. Just a bit. right. So a couple comments on this before we get into it. Again, some of these hit songs, like even when they're an artist that I'm not a huge fan of, like I've never purposefully put on a John Mayer song before, although I ever play John Mayer on the radio and at weddings and whatever. Whenever I hear some of the biggest hit songs, I'm like, oh, I get it. No, I get like why it works. If I actually have to sit down and listen to it and follow what's happening in the arrangement, I'm like, I get why it's successful. First of all, the intro is mixed and arranged brilliantly. Even if you don't like John Mayer, just like the count off and the sound of the drums and how it plays against the organ, all that's done brilliantly. Whether or not you end up liking an artist often comes down to like whether or not you like their voice and who the singer is. But that stuff in the beginning really excellently executed. I mean, the kick is just so big and round and earthy, and Manny did a brilliant job there. But once the whole track drops, Manny keeps the focus on what's really important. It's no longer the kick and like the breakbeat aspect of the rhythm. It's the ride cymbal. This is the first time in today's session that we're hearing someone prioritize cymbals over kick and snare, but they're right. They are right. Manny is absolutely right. Like once the track gets going, to prioritize that ride cymbal. The ride cymbal is like almost louder than the vocal, but that is where the groove of the song is coming from. And that's the kind of thing that Michael often does right, is that he focuses on, okay, what's important about the rhythm? Let me support that foundationally. But what Michael might not have thought to do that Manny got right maybe in this track is Manny realized that that thing could be the ride cymbal, and maybe Michael's bias towards, he's often a kick-heavy mixer, his bias might have been to keep that kick going and have it be like the thumping thing the whole way through, and he might have accented the breakbeat aspect of the track the whole way through. Well, there was something that Manny did that served the song better, where maybe they were like, oh, Manny, you got the idea, that ride cymbal, that's the groove of this track. This is old school R&B. Ride cymbal is loud and dark, and then the vocal is a little bit almost behind it. Let's listen for that difference in Manny's mix. This isn't the Manny Marroquin mix masters, but just hear that approach, and then we'll listen to the difference with Michael's track. And with Michael's track, the way he treats the vocal differently is big. Michael's vocal is a lot more solid and a lot more loud, and we'll get to that in a minute. But listen for some of those things. Just listen again to the intro and how the focus of this track shifts from the kick drum and the breakbeat aspect of the drum to the hi-hat. That's Manny Marroquin doing this. Here we go. Isn't it interesting how those little muted guitar stabs jump out louder than the vocal, even though they're like so muted and up close? They're like these little things that end up leaping out. And then there's that prominent stick on the ride. And then the vocal is surprisingly low. It's like lower than these little muted guitar stabs. Now let's hear a totally different track mixed by Michael Brauer. Similar kind of breakbeat thing, not as big in the bottom though. See what I mean about Michael sometimes being like a kick-dominant mixer? But in this track, it's not the kick, it's the downbeat. It's not just the kick, it's the bass that's hitting there too. So he is making the bass big here, but the bass, it doesn't sound like a bass line. It just sounds like something pulling us to one. This is like the most kick-like bass sound, right? It's just like, it's emphasizing what normally would be happening in the kick is being done by the bass. It's like, right? It's just that end one feel. Or is it one end? I have to count it. Let's go back. Let's hear this drop. So he has a kind of light kick in this one because the bass is going to come in and back up that kick. And that's what's going to make the kick really blossom, is the bass kind of doubling it.
sign. Is there anyone who...
Do you hear how much differently the vocal sits in Michael Brauer's mix compared to Manny's mix? In Manny's mix, he's almost like underneath the band, kind of shouting to be heard over it, but it still works. And in Michael's, he is up front and center with a little bit of space around him.
Really recalls ever breaking record out for something someone yelled real loud one time.
It's interesting, like there's so much effect on his voice without the effect being clearly apparent. I'd love to talk to Michael more about his use of reverb and delay, because he's like Serban Ghenea in that way, where he uses vocal reverb and delay in a way where there's so much space around the vocal without you ever noticing that there's a reverb or delay on the vocal. That was one of the big differences in this first track. If you listen to his reverb on Coldplay's Yellow, like it's there, but you don't know that it's there, but it's adding something. And you listen to High Speed and it's like, oh, there's a vocal plus reverb. Totally different vibe.
Oh, everyone believes in how they think it ought to be. Oh, everyone believes, and they're not going easily. Belief is a beautiful armor, makes for the heaviest sword, like punching underwater. You never can hit who you're trying for. Some need the exhibition.
So listen to where that vocal sits and how like one dominant, how downbeat dominant it is with kick and bass, and compare that to what's happening with the vocal in Manny's mix.
Waiting on the world to change. It's hard to be persistent when we're standing at a distance. So we keep waiting.
Yeah. So much more ride, and this vocal that's just doesn't have that same kind of effect around, doesn't have that same kind of stability. And man, you sometimes got to have a track like that just emphasizes the quarter notes. Like it's such a cheap trick that works. Like on the right track, something that's just pulsed away in the quarter note that give me more cowbell feel, but in this case, give me more ride cymbal. It's a trick that keeps coming back in music because it keeps working. All right, now we're going to hear a little bit of Michael Brauer against Tom Elmhurst. Tom Elmhurst, very famous for mixing Adele, but also a whole bunch of other big artists. And this is an artist named Ellie King. I think Mark Ronson might have been a producer or at least a player on this album. And I wanted to find a couple tracks where Michael's maybe he's getting a little bolder and doing slightly less conventionally old school Michael-y things. Let's see, this album is 2015. So he's getting bigger and bolder. I think he has a really well-executed mix here on what is probably the hit single on this, X's and O's. Let's hear a little bit of that, and then we'll hear a little bit of Tom Elmhurst. So there you go. Michael can do big and loud and throbbing and blocky and dry and wide. So this is the first mix where it's like the opposite of everything I told you that Michael does, and it's working.
I had me a boy, turn him into a man.
Oh, but it's not the opposite of everything Michael does. As soon as the vocal comes in, there it is again. The whole thing is like one unit with the vocal sitting on top, loud, with space around it that you don't hear. Hear that again. Yeah, I mean, here are the Michael-y things. If you want 1, 2, and 4 to be big in your track, Michael is great at doing that and making the whole just rhythm of the track. Like he can have this dominant 1 and a dominant 2 and 4 like all at the same time. And this is him going wider than any other tracks we've heard so far. Like there's hard panning choices in here that are dissimilar to some of the earlier stuff that we heard. But these hard panning choices, they're like moving as a unit together. And this, again, I think part of his multi-layered bus compression approach, plays into this kind of thing. But the whole rhythmic track feels like it's moving as a unit together. It's cohesive, even though this one is wider, has less center and more width than the others. And then that vocal does that super Michael-y thing of just being loud up in front, the most important thing, without making it sound like it's karaoke. And there's plenty of space around the vocal without you hearing the reverb. It's all there.
Run back to me, 'cause I'm the best baby that they never gotta keep. 1, 2, 3, they gonna run back to me. They always wanna come, but they never wanna leave. Exes and the oh-ohs, they haunt me. Like oh-ohs, they want me to make them oh-oh, they won't let go. Exes and oh.
Now, man, we could just do a lesson on popular pop songwriting and arranging just based on what this song executes well. I mean, this song, it's about 500 million streams from an artist you might not even be aware of. It obviously overshadows everything else on the record. But man, when you have like a big payoff like that, the arrangement is so important. So there's two things that are happening in the arrangement. One, it's an interesting arrangement at the micro level in that the instruments and how they fit together are interesting, and there's interesting sounds and interesting rhythmic juxtaposition. Like that aspect of arranging works. But the even more important aspect of arranging is the song arc aspect of arranging, where they're making that payoff at a minute in feel so expected, so obligatory, so obvious that it's coming, but also it's surprising and satisfying at the same time. And if you can structure your songs properly to keep that kind of arc, those kinds of ideas where the listener is waiting for the next thing to happen and they're curious, they know that something interesting is going to happen and they know you're going to deliver on it, but they're curious to find out on exactly what it is. It's like watching a good stand-up comic where you know when they're getting closer to the punchline and you're expecting the punchline and you're expecting it to be unexpected, but it's unexpected in a slightly different way than you expected, and that's what makes it funny. And that's what's in a great song arrangement. And again, if you're not an Elle King fan, I don't know if it's Elle King or Ellie King, tell me in the comments or in the chat if you know. It doesn't matter if you're a fan. You should be able to recognize that they're doing that and figure out how to do that in your own songs if you want to write successful popular music. It might not be your goal to write successful popular music, and that's okay too. There's still things we can learn texturally about mixing. All right, let's compare that to Tom Elmhurst. And here's a Tom Elmhurst mix. Tom Elmhurst reminds me a little bit of Manny Marroquin in that he's so good with saturated mid-range.
I got one hand on the bottle and one foot in the grave.
Totally different approach to vocal reverb, right? This is closer to his approach with, the vocals, reverbs on Adele that have helped make Adele so famous. I mean, obviously, it's her being a good singer and there being well-arranged songs, but some of the reverbs that Tom Elmhurst does on Adele help. And he has that kind of approach here. We're hearing Tom Elmhurst reverb. We're hearing that he's making a conscious choice to make a certain kind of reverb that you hear. You hear vocal and then you hear reverb. You're not hearing that in Michael. In Michael, you don't even know that there's reverb there or delay there, even though there is. Michael's vocals are not totally dry. There's ambience around them without that ambience ever being apparent. But with Tom, you're hearing it. Listen to the vocal. Listen to how much more mid-rangey and saturated he's going to make things. Listen to how much more kind of pointy he's allowing the vocal to be. And a little bit smaller in ways he's allowing the vocal to be. And how much he's allowing you to hear the reverb that's on the vocal rather than just feeling it.
I got one hand on the bottle and one foot in the grave. It's been too long since I slept, but I ain't got time to waste.
I say reverb loosely. I mean, some of that's delay, right? You hear some of that slapback delay on her voice. And then there's some of these really big reverbs on the snare.
3 long days, boy, you better breaks when that light shines on you. Gonna wanna stay forever and a day, but it's the night that I belong to. Well, the clock keeps ticking and your time is running out.
So, very different. But now here's another mix from Michael that's not quite as big and modern and wide as the first one we heard. So here's another Michael mix for the song Jackson.
Mama's dead and gone.
Ooh, that was like the first time I heard a little bit of Michael's delay in this whole 120 songs I've listened to here.
Papa ain't there. Mama's dead and gone.
Just the tiniest bit of slap on Mama.
Papa don't care.
This is wide compared to Michael's earlier stuff. We're 5 years later than some of the other tracks we were listening to, 15 years later than I think the Coldplay track, and his style is developing. He's getting bigger and wider, more in that direction that Chad Blake does so well. We've also looked at in this channel in this series. There's a little Farfisa organ in there. There's a little organ in the background. It's barely there. Some other mixer is going to say, hey, there's an organ there. We should probably let people know it's there. No. Michael's going to be like, that's not the point of this section. It's just going to be audible.
Brother buried his head. Brother buried his head. Pocket full of shotgun shells. He's just a married man. In that whiskey well. What's left of my backbone is building this broken home, building it up just to leave. City will chain me. How could you blame me? Not breaking the law to break free. So please take Jackson out of me.
Now, lot of compression happening there. But even though the track got so much bigger and there's so many more things happening, the vocal still stayed in the same place. He's still good with those solid vocals that they just never change their audible loudness. They're just always sitting in the same spot. Also, I'm curious to see, this being 2015, how much louder this has gotten. I think this is one of the trade-offs that you end up running into, where at a certain point, you start to get this trade-off where you can only get so loud and have the intensity increase. And I think the one missed opportunity here is if this particular track was mixed a little bit quieter, we could have had an even more huge fat buildup in that spot. Let me see if I can give you my full screen here so we can go over to Audio Hijack, take a look at Hawkeye here, and look at our loudness on this. My guess is it's got to be at least -10 or something. Let me grab this track.
City will chain me. What's left of my backbone is building this broken home, building it up just to leave. City will chain.
Yeah, in this section we're getting to like 4 and 5. I think in the beginning we might be closer to -10. Let me double check.
Dead and gone. Papa ain't there. Mama's dead and gone. Papa don't care. Brother buried his head.
So I'm looking often at this momentary loudness, and you can see in this beginning quiet section, we're already at like -10, maybe -8 or something. So there's not that much louder to go when we get to this hottest section and we hit, it keeps on scaling up, and the very loudest, we're almost like at -4. And I just wish there was still like another dB of room left to go. I wish the track was like a dB quieter, just so we get even more lift in that loudest section. But let's hear that one more time.
Full of shotgun shells. He's just a married man, stuck in that whiskey well. What's left of my backbone is building this broken home, building it up just to leave. City will chain me. How could you blame me? Not breaking the law to break free. So please take Jackson out of me. Sister Laser.
And that's the one thing sometimes people complain about in the modern era of over limiting. And that's the kind of thing that sometimes I hear is like, we have such this rich, huge bottom end in these other sections. And then we get to the loudest payoff of the song and it works for a track that gets like -3 almost. It still works and it sounds good for -3, but we just lose some of that bottom end that we have in the rest of the track kind of necessarily. And we lose some of that kind of like mass and heft right at our, intermediate climax here. So that's one of my little nerdy things there. I'm not a super like dynamic range guy where like it has to be dynamic. No, it's totally okay to go super loud as long as you do it awesomely well. And I think people are doing it even more awesomely well in 2024 than they were in 2015, but it can also be done badly. Not that this is done badly. I think this is done for this era and this time as well as anyone is going to do it. And it's still compelling and it doesn't sound bad. I just wish that I could still have some of that mass even when we're in that loudest section. But it is fairly dynamic for a loud track, right? Because we're swinging from -10 to -3 is a fairly big swing for a pop track. So in a way, it is dynamic. All right, now let's listen to another track by Tom Elmhurst. This is one of his, I think, bigger, hotter tracks off this album. Or I could be totally wrong. No, yeah, this is what I meant, yeah. This big distorted kick thing. This is a very like Manny Marrakeeny kind of thing to do that Tom Elmhurst also does so well, of having these saturated mid-range and like big, interesting, solid bottom elements that just have a signature sound.
Train's coming, but I'm stuck on this road.
That's something none of this we have heard in any Michael Brauer mix so far, right? Couple of elements. How big and overblown and saturated that kick is and how much of a signature sound and how forward that is. Michael's known for big kicks, but this is another level. Number 2, how much we hear the reverb on the vocal. I mean, we're not hearing reverbs like that in Brauer. And then with this banjo comes in, this lonely banjo off to the side in its own space, separated from the rest of the mix. Again, very un-Michael-like. He would find a way to like tuck that and make it feel like it's part of the surrounding track rather than standing out from it. Listen for those things in Tom Elmhurst's mix.
Train's coming, but I'm stuck on this road. Moon's rising and my blood is growing cold. Preacher man can't save a soul like mine. Miracles are just too damn hard to find.
So there you go. There's a little bit of Ellie King. Tell me how I'm supposed to pronounce it, please, if you can. We got some more tracks here by Panic the Disco, Phoenix. I'll let you listen to those ones yourself. Melissa Etheridge, I'll let you listen to that. Let's do a little bit of Bob Dylan and a little bit of what I really want to hear, which is some Grizzly Bear. I want to share that with you. I did an interview with Michael and Grizzly Bear when it came out because I really did like that Grizzly Bear record he worked on. So we'll get to that in a second. But first, here's the biggest, most famous song, the original mix of Lovesick from Time Out of My Mind. This original version, let's see how popular it is. I mean, this is the original version, maybe Lovesick. Oh no, the biggest one on this would be Make You Feel My Love, about 28 million listens for Bob Dylan. Let's hear just a couple little snippets of Bob Dylan. I'll play the even numbered tracks, which are the original mix. I think it was Daniel Lanois. And then I'll play the much drier, more focused and centered Michael Brauer mix. So here's the original mix of Lovesick. And I'm going to skip a little bit ahead into the track.
Here's someone tell a lie.
So I think Daniel Lanois has put like a phaser on the vocal. Is that something that Michael Brauer is going to do? My guess is no.
Did I hear someone's distant cry? I spoke like a child. You destroyed me with a smile while I was sleeping.
And it's definitely got a mood and a vibe, and it's wide and super stereo, especially for this era. Let's check out the Michael Brauer remix in 2022 at Bob Dylan's request.
I'm sick of love, that I'm in the thick of it. This
I think I'll have to go back earlier because I think also Michael Brauer doesn't have on this weird extended intro that Daniel Lanois has there.
tell a lie.
Yeah, let's start from here.
Here's someone tell a lie. Did I hear someone's distant cry?
So these are actually relatively prominent effects for Michael Brauer. And this isn't his digital age as well, because this is 2022. I think he switched to in-the-box mixing by 2022. And one thing I have noticed is he's actually mixed a couple of tracks for clients of mine now. And I have noticed in this newer period of his that his vocal effects are becoming more apparent and the brightness on his cymbals is going up. I think often that happens with old age. Didn't want to say old age about Michael Brauer, older age. As mixers become more advanced in age, they often can hear less and less above 10K, and unless they have some young intern double checking them, they can load on more 10K into their cymbals than is ideal. And then hopefully they get caught by their young intern or by the, the frequency analyzers or their mastering engineer, and those things get tempered a little bit. But I do hear more vocal effect here. Part of that, though, is because he's remixing something that had so much weird vocal effect. And I think Michael's trying to say, okay, this is one of those songs that has affected vocals. I'm supposed to make the vocals sound affected, but I'm not going to put a phaser on them. Come on. Here we are in 2022, and I'm going to put a phaser on the vocal. That's not what we're doing. I'll do some delay that you can hear, and that will be me being effecty. But that said, I have heard a couple of more recent Michael Brauer mixes where we hear a little bit more vocal effect than we used to on his older mixes. Let's hear a little bit more of this.
I spoke like a child. You destroyed me with a smile while I was sleeping.
And in that section, when things get a little bit louder, the vocal effects get swallowed up a little bit more. So there's a chance he's kind of like mimicking what Daniel Lanois was doing, where the vocal effect is more prominent in some spots than others. Let's hear just a little bit more sampling of these. I didn't listen to these the whole way through, so I'm kind of experiencing them for the first time along with you. Let's hear just a couple more tracks back to back, and then we'll go into Grizzly Bear. This is the original mix. Weird, right? Some Dylan fans did complain about this album being overproduced and Daniel Lanois' hand being too apparent in it. And I think that's one of the reasons the remix happened. I believe that Bob Dylan referred to this record as sounding kind of too swampy for him, was I think his word. Kind of lost, right? Now let's listen to Michael Brauer's version. And let's hear how that vocal is handled in the original. So I think Michael's mix is better. It's also louder, which makes it sound better. But it's an interesting challenge because it feels like he's trying to pay homage to like, okay, this was mixed in a really kind of wet, effecty way. I need to leave some wetness of an effect in there, but let's also try to make it drier and more upfront at the same time. And I'm not going to mimic Bob Dylan's mix. I'm going to, Daniel Lanois' mix. I'm going to mix this fresh, but while keeping some of that wetness in there. Or maybe Daniel Lanois might have committed a lot of wetness to a lot of elements that's just in there. And now he's maybe adding more wetness on top of it in certain spots to try to gel them together. This is on the early side of Michael Brauer learning to mix in the box. I think he really started to mix in the box in 2020, and this is him in 2022. And the thing that I've experienced in Michael's latest mixes since he's switched to mixing in the box, he's getting better and better at each year, but I do feel a little bit more of the vocal effects being more apparent than they used to be in his older style. Maybe that's intentional. And also there being a little bit more harshness in the upper mid-range. That I think is his mixes sound a little bit pokier in very recent years than some of the older stuff we were listening to. I have no doubt that he has improved at mixing the box, and I think he's going to continue to get better at it. And you know, Chad Blake went through a similar thing where he was at this nexus of going from out of the box to in the box. Now he's one of the best in the box mixers on the planet, in my opinion. And yeah, I think Michael's mixes are already good in the box, but I think he's a lot of these guys, when they switch from out of the box to in the box, they take it as an opportunity to say, I'm going to change something about my style because my whole workflow is changing. And maybe this is a good time to make stylistic changes as well. And maybe there's some of that happening as well, that he's just not shying away from vocal effect as much. So there could be aspects of that. But now let's go to a record that he did where, again, his big thing is not about making it sound impressive or hi-fi. It's about enhancing the emotional impact of the song. Does Michael Brauer's Bob Dylan mixes, do they connect better with the song and with the end listener than the original Daniel Lanois mixes? I'm going to have to listen to the albums again, but probably. I feel like the mix is a little bit in the way in Daniel Lanois' record. Like, I get why Bob Dylan wanted it remixed, and I get why Bob Dylan fans wanted it remixed. Did Michael Brauer do the perfect mix of it? I don't know. I've got to listen to the whole thing through. But he's absolutely bringing the band and the vocalist closer to you, if that makes sense, and making them more audible. And you're hearing more of the song and less of the production, even though I still hear some of the production there. All right. Let's get on to the last stuff. Oh, man, I don't know what exactly to play you. I'll just play you Michael Brauer's mix off of Shields. Now, this was in 2010, I think, that this album came out. Let me double check the year. I could be off just slightly. It could be 2012. And I want to tell you a little story about that and why I'm telling you this. Yeah, 2012. I started writing for SonicScoop in 2010. I did my first 3 articles for free. My very first ones were like an interview with Joel Hamilton, an interview with John Agnello, an interview with somebody else. And then I started writing articles for them regularly. And when this record came out, Grizzly Bear was like the critics' darling of the day. And there's some really good songs off their prior record, like, what is it? 2 Weeks is the big song off the prior record. I'm not sure if I have it here. Yeah, off of Vekatimist. I mean, it's a good track. That was everywhere for a while if you were living in one of the big cities in 2012. And this record came out, critically acclaimed band, doing a mix with Michael Brauer. This was like a self-produced, weird indie, critically acclaimed band, and they were going to have like a major label mixer mix one of their albums. And I was like, oh, this is like, I'm having flashbacks to the early 90s when the, grunge bands produced by Brian Eno were now going to go and be produced by like one of the big major label producers. And was it going to ruin their sound? Was it going to be all polished? And it's like, that is not what happened here. I, like anyone else might think like, oh, Michael Brauer, he's a big major label producer. He must make things sound big and glossy and shiny and really sanitize things. And I didn't really realize that that's not what Michael Brauer does. He does almost the opposite of that. Sometimes his mixes are relatively trashy sounding. They have an out-of-phase drum kit in the opening. And me hearing this record of like, okay, famous major label mixer guy mixes cool, self-produced, grungy indie band. Is this going to sound like some polished out indie band? And no, it sounds like this. Right? This is definitely not a record that has been sanitized. It definitely still sounds like there's like this 60s-ish garagey aspect of it, mixed with early 2000s record production. Their prior record, which I think was more self-produced, maybe Chris Taylor, the main guy in the band, did, I think, most of the stuff himself, sounds a little bit more like this. And I think one of the big differences that Michael really contributes to so well is making the vocal really work and doing some weird things with the vocal. There's some weird things like the direct sound of the vocal almost drops out, but the reverb's still hanging there. He's moving faders, and you can hear it if you're a totally nerdy, mixery person like I am. Let's hear a tiny bit of another track off of their prior album, mixed by somebody else.
While you wait for the others to make it all worthwhile, all your useless pretensions are weighing on my time. You could beg for forgiveness.
So that's the non-Michael Brauer mix. And I think you can get what I'm saying about the separation between elements, there being more of it. Here's another big track off. This is probably the biggest track off of their prior album, which is not mixed by him. Really good. This probably doesn't have nearly as many listens as it should. How many listens does this have? 279 million. Go give 2 Wakes a listen. I'm dating myself with this 12-year-old track, but it did well in the circles it did well, and for good reason. I mean, that is just brilliantly arranged, and the mix is good. I really feel like if Michael mixed that, there's something where like I feel like there might have been even slightly bigger payoff in some spots. But really, really nice. And then the next record they do is with, I think it's with Sean Everett helping them produce it. So it becomes like way bigger and glossier and like this.
I made a mistake.
And now into 2017, it's just a totally different era of record production. I mean, there's definitely a different sound at 2010 and 2020, and this is a lot closer to 2020 than it is to 2010. And this record, Shields, really starts to bridge that gap, at least in the indie world. All right, I'm probably getting too esoteric. We're not going to listen to any more of this stuff. Twin Shadow, we'd be getting even more esoteric there. But thanks for listening to this stuff with me. Hopefully you took something out of this. It's been fun doing this with you guys. I would love to read through all of your comments, and I'm going to do that as soon as this live stream ends. Really a blast to have you on these. And I got to give you a big thank you. And if you want to check out more of these, we've got a whole playlist. You can check out the track where I mix a track against Michael Brauer. Oh my goodness, I probably should have brought that up. You can go here into Safari. I'm running out of time to do it, but if we go into Safari here, I have a mix. You can look it up like Justin Colletti beat a Grammy-winning mixer. I think it's called Can I Beat a Grammy-winning mixer with stock plugins. So check this one out if you want to hear me go head-to-head with Michael Brauer. Look for this video. Can I beat a Grammy-winning mixer with stock plugins? And it's me and Michael Brauer mixing the same track. I use nothing but stock Pro Tools plugins, and I think you can learn a lot from that about what makes for good mixing, how different mixes can sound with the same people doing it, and just how good you can get mixing-wise using nothing but stock plugins. There's probably 50-50 split in there. If you look at the comments, probably 50% of people are saying Michael Brauer's mix is better. It follows the emotional arc of the song better. And 50% of the comments in there is your mix is better. It sounds better. Like there's these elements that I can hear and it's more impressive. And neither of them are wrong. Like once you get to a certain level, it's about tastes, and people are hiring Michael for his tastes because they like the way he hears things and the way he likes to present things. And at a certain point, it's not about better and worse. When we're listening to Michael Brauer next to Manny Marroquin or Tom Elmhurst, it's sometimes just who is a better fit for the artist or for that particular song. Some mixers get a certain type of song and a certain type of rhythm section more than others. And I think that's some stuff that we heard here today. Well, I've got to split, but I've got to tell you before I split that if you want to support this, give it a like, give it a thumbs up, give it a share. That really dramatically helps us. And if you really want to sponsor this podcast, the best way to sponsor it is by sponsoring yourself. Check out one of our great full-length courses like Mixing Breakthroughs, Mastering Demystified, EQ Breakthroughs, Compression Breakthroughs. All of them are guaranteed to change the way that you mix forever, for the better, or your money back. And I am not just saying this, the before and afters that I get to hear, the emails that I get about how it has changed people's lives, like literally overnight improvements in mixing was just like leapfrog moments from taking Mixing Breakthroughs. I guarantee you that if you take this course, you will improve at mixing. If you go through the modules and you do the exercises in them, there is no doubt that you will get better at mixing, and it'll be a far better investment for you than any plugin that you can buy. 100% guaranteed. And if you disagree, you just ask for your money back and you get it back, and I don't even have to know about it. So please do yourself a favor and check out this course, Mixing Breakthroughs. Start there. And if you already have Mixing Breakthroughs, try out one of our other great full-length courses. Bundle them together. Compression Breakthroughs, EQ Breakthroughs, Mastering Demystified. Compression Breakthroughs and EQ Breakthroughs will change the way that you hear and use EQ and compression. I mean, even if you just take the first 90 minutes of the courses, you will be literally forever changed. I 100% guarantee you that's how front-loaded they are. But if you want to go super deep and know everything about every way to use compression and EQ and every type of instrument, every single genre, there's like 8 or 9 hours that you can go into. And there's practice sessions. But even if you only got through the first 90 minutes, you would be forever changed, guaranteed. It is way more tightly orchestrated than any of my live streams, I'll tell you that. Also, big shout out and thanks to Soundtoys, making some of my favorite creative mixing effects in the known universe. Try out anything they make for 30 days for free over at soundtoys.com. Also, you want a discount on some stuff, check out Baby Audio. Go over to babyaud.io/SonicScoop. That's babyaud.io/SonicScoop and enter the code SonicScoop at checkout for 15% off, even their already discounted prices over at Baby Audio. All right, last but not least, Focusrite. We're giving away a Scarlett interface. Not just one, but 3 of them. So you have 3 chances to win. Just enter your email one time. You get 3 chances to win at sonicscoop.com/contest. That's sonicscoop.com/contest. Check that out. And thanks again for hanging out with me. This has been Justin Colletti of SonicScoop. See you next time.